All right, friends, it is 5 o'clock, so we're going to start. You are here for the Games as Teaching Tools panel, and the description runs like this. Gaming is most often seen as a leisure hobby that can be used for teaching as well. Many subjects can benefit from using games as a tool, and some genres are well suited to illustrate certain ideas. Come discuss your go-to games and how they can be used. So, welcome to the panel. You're welcome to stay if this is not the panel you want to be at. I think you'll have fun anyways. A couple of reminders as we get started. Care for yourself, so make sure you're drinking your water. If you need to get up and use the restroom, no one's going to judge you. And if you need personal space, just find a spot in the room that's going to give you the space that you need. I also ask that you care for your fellow audience members and take time to listen to each other and be aware of the amount of time that you are spending speaking. This also goes for us panelists, of course. And finally, you'll notice that there are papers around the room with colors and shapes. If you have a question, we're going to have you hold that up so that we can say orange circle rather than try to come up with a way to describe you. At the end, there is a QR code in the back of the room where you can put in a review of the panel if you choose to do so. I'm Amanda. I go by she, her, and I volunteered for this panel because I use games every day as a teaching tool in various contexts that I work in and also that I play in. So I'm excited to be here today. Can my fellow panelists introduce yourselves?
If the mic is picking up, I'm Zaydden Johnson. I go by he, him, and I came on this panel because I've had experience with games as teaching tools.
I'm Kenneth Justiniano. I'm on this panel basically because I create games. I create tabletop games and I create video games. In the process, I always have looked at games in relations to the people that are playing them and what they can learn from them.
So hello everyone, my name is Jules Porter. I'm very happy to be here and I'm very happy to see all of your somewhat smiling faces. I was born and raised here in Minneapolis. I'm a local attorney. I do a lot of computer technology law, AI law, and now some family law. And I get in the courtroom a lot, so I do some litigation as well. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. And I'm also a video game developer. We make games for the PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo that have more black and brown superheroes and just really good people. Like, we should be able to just slay dragons and save villagers as well. So that's what I do. And I also develop AI. It's a pleasure to be. Oh, and I teach business law and intellectual property law at the University of St. Thomas.
Hi, I'm Melanie Reed. I'm a newly retired professor of science education from Wayne State University. And I taught science methods in the elementary ed program. So that means I taught future teachers how to teach science to the little ones. So obviously gamification and using games, all sorts of things is key to a lot of getting these kids to think scientifically, think in a creative way, think in all that good stuff, critical analysis. So that's my background. And plus I play way too much Minecraft.
Sandbox.
All right, well, we're going to start with a basic question of how. How do you use or experience games as teaching tools? A little bit more about your context.
Okay.
I can start. I can kick us off now. All right. So my experience that really was eye-opening for me in just how formative games are in teaching you things when you just think you're playing and just having fun was when I went to visit Rome. So I studied art law and international human rights in Rome, and while I was there, I'd never been there before. I went to the cathedral in Oviedo. I just did all these things, and I realized, wait a second, why does this all seem so familiar? Like I've been here before. When I went to the cathedral, I was like, there's going to be a hidden chapel over there, and there was. I was like, there's going to be a stained glass window that looks like this over there, and that was. So shout out to Ubisoft. It hit me that they did such a good job with a brick by brick recreate with some changes, right? Because they have to put some handholds you can get around. But for the most part, it was so accurate that when I went there, I knew my way around. I was like, this is ridiculous. But that that really was powerful, because I realized the game is about assassinating people, killing people, but you have to learn the environment in order for you to be successful at the game. And that just, yeah, because when I went to law school, it was at the time of the social justice crisis, and I was trying to figure out how can I use my skill set to help, right? Because it's a huge, big issue. How can I do anything, right? And I was like, okay, with my passion, right, and for video games and for social justice, let's mesh those two and see what we can do by sort of, you know, having a lot of fun, but also teaching some nuanced, multicultural competency at the same time. And so that's kind of where my focus and my passion for video games as teaching tools came from.
For me, I've been developing homebrewed games since I was 10. I'm 55 now. And it's one of those things where I've played in almost every gaming system that had been created up until about 2012, when I created my own gaming system called Simplicity. The idea behind people's interactions in day-to-day life when brought to a table, and then pushing people's experiences so that they can reflect on what they're doing. A mechanic in the game system that I created is the brag system. The brag system, at the end of a session, people say what it is, what happened, that they found, you know, that, okay, Billy did this during the game, Bob did that during the game, and it's a shared experience where people get to be able to not just brag about themselves, but tell people what they did that was really good. It is something that most games don't do. And in doing so, it brings everybody around the table so much closer. And in my iterations of gameplay and learning how people play games, just trying to create avenues that they hadn't experienced before. And that was to me, and it was showing me that people are learning. They're coming out of their shell. They're doing things that they weren't doing before. So, that to me is the way, and the way my mind works when it comes to games. What I'm envisioning, it's like I remember back in the days where I was playing Sorry and Risk, and how, like Monopoly, how everybody around the table would get so mad. And it's one of those things. It's like there needs to be better games, and I set off to try and do that.
How about in the education field?
Well, we use I'm coming out from an elementary ed perspective here, even though I've taught everything from 6th grade science through university students. There's not a lot of difference between those two groups. So we use games. Both my students at the university create games, and we use games for particular reasons. One is to get those little brains thinking in an orderly way. A good game has a goal that you're trying to accomplish. It has rules that you have to follow to accomplish that goal. There's some sort of feedback you're going to get. You're either going to get to a point where you can't go on, or somebody's going to assassinate you or something like that. And you want it to be a kind of a safe, pleasurable experience, something that they can, they know that nothing really bad is going to happen to them, maybe to the character, but not to them. So we use this to sort of engage their critical thinking, allow them to explore concepts in safe ways. They work through some really basic science process skills. You have to gather information. You have to figure out how you're going to put these things together to create something. And then you have to evaluate, how well did I do that? And if I do it again, how would I change it? That's science in a nutshell. Okay, that's the science process there. And you can do that in a lot of games. We could go back to the classics like chess and Parcheesi and Go And, some of those sort of things for critical thinking and mathematics, just learning those sort of maths as you go along, all the way through things like Stardew Valley and Minecraft and, any of those open sort of sandboxy games where, I tried to build, my first house in Minecraft was just a bunch of mud. Because that's all I knew how to do. It kept the zombies out, but it was still just basically a box of mud. But now, after learning all these things, now I can create this. And there is definite evidence through research that shows that really does engage things in our brain. Our brain changes as we play these sorts of games. And so that's what we're trying to, that's one of the things I try to get my students to see. And they really did, because my students, the ones that I just finished with after all these years, because I've been in the education gig since 1985. Okay, this is my 40th year of teaching something. So my university students, they knew this no problem. They were native gamers, so they just went to this like fish in water. So that's how I've been using it. Plus cool things, I don't know if you guys noticed, I have to make a plug for our football player, guest of honor. There is a physics of football session. That's gaming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anything, Zaydden?
Oh, yeah, I'm coming at this from my perspective as an elementary school student when technology was becoming very, very readily available in the school space, where they gave us games and tasks to do on things. It was very helpful with math and scientific areas. But that's generally just where I'm coming from.
And examples of some of those would be games like Prodigy, or Kahoot, or Quizlet. Any other ones I'm forgetting?
I mean, big Assassin's Creed fan over here. So we can't remember that Assassin's Creed Origins, right? They actually made a non-violent version of that, and they added in curated museum experiences by actual museum, people. And they actually gave you voiceover, so as you kind of went through, you went through a tomb of a certain pharaoh, or you went through a certain temple, right? You interacted, you would actually hear somebody explaining to you, and it would be in text as well, what you're actually looking at, what you're seeing, and what they put in the game. And I thought that was super dope. And so they made that because they had a request from educators to do something like that, because Ubisoft's version of ancient Egypt is the most accurate version I think that we've had in media. So I thought that was really awesome.
One game that's like that comes to mind is Civilization.
Yeah, Civilization, but it's a little different. But Civilization is, I still play Civ 4 on my PC. I refuse to pick up Sixers.
And who remembers Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?
Yes.
Who can sing Where in the World is
It's supposed to be coming back out.
Yes, it
So
is.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So,
I was just going to ask, I'm curious if anyone had any experience with a game called Zumbini's Logical Adventure.
Yeah.
Was that one in school?
That one?
Yeah.
What's that one like?
We played it in school. You basically build a little squad of dudes that you're trying to escort to the tree, which is kind of the end goal, and you hit roadblocks where you have to give some dudes a pizza, and every time you mess up, they get rid of one of your guys. After a certain number of failures, of course, because you have to have a chance to logic it out yourself. Because the whole point is you figure out what they want by they'll say more or less, and you put things on. It's puzzles like that that are really trying to test your logical deduction.
I think that's a good point. We're of an era where we kind of focus on the video sort of things. But these logic puzzles and such have an ancient lineage. And so they go back, you were thinking of I can't always mess up on the name. It's the one about the bridges of Königsberg, where you have to go through all the bridges, but you can't go back through any of the bridges. Yeah, and that's for the 1700s or so. Yeah.
I often will use games in small group situations of like 6 to 15. I work with teenagers a lot. And I'll often take a game to use it as the conversation starter for the next step. One of the things that I do is I'll take the Dungeons and Dragons alignment chart and I'll hand them a handful of plastic figures of people and characters and things they know, and I'll say, can you put these on the alignment chart? And we'll explain, you know, good versus evil and lawful versus chaotic and what all that means. And then they have this great discussion about where each of these characters belong, followed by a discussion on where they would want to see themselves and what kind of person they want to be. So I think that games can also be used for goals clarification.
I know I've used simplicity before to explain times and period pieces. I had a teacher friend bring it into his classroom where the students were learning about the bootleggers period. And because my system isn't period specific, the kids had to research their characters, the time, the jobs. They basically, you know, before they even started playing, they had to come up with these rich backstories for their characters. And then once they were playing, it's the logic of what your actions and what your choices are and what your consequences will be. And the teacher was like, he never seen a bunch of kids more interested in what was going on. You know, one of the kids knew everything about a Tommy gun, how to take it apart, how to put it back. Another one understood what were the failing factors of the economy at the time. So, you know, it's like, oh no, we can't, you know, we've got money, so we're going to invest it in the stock market, but we can't invest it in these stocks because those are the stocks that are going to go boom. And the teacher was like, he wasn't expecting the kids to actually get engaged as much. He thought that, you know, this will be a fun project to do as a side thing. And he was able to incorporate all the learning that he needed into the game.
Why else have you chosen to use games as teaching tools? Can you say more about the science or the gamification and why that makes sense to you and how that makes your brain work?
It's that cookie. We're all taught about get that cookie.
It's leveling up. It's the whole need to level up.
It's like,
and it's a motivating force with people. Hell of a lot more motivating than getting an ABC grade.
So I think for my work, I think I maybe approach it at a little bit of a different angle, right? So my company, part of what we do is we make video games. The other part of what we do is we teach 10th, 11th, and 12th graders how to develop video games for the PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, and we try to get them job and career ready upon high school graduation. With the goal of hopefully hiring them for our company, like kind of building up our own workforce, because we don't have a console video game development workforce here. Like just trying to find a character animator has been extremely difficult, especially to find one locally. So I have to now train them up.
Yep.
And so one of the things too is one of the reasons why there's such a negative representation of Black and brown people in video gaming, like technically, you generally, outside of sports games, we're less than 3% of the characters. And that's combining Black people with Native Americans, with Hispanic people, right? So outside of sports games, we're pretty much depicted as gangsters, mobsters, drug dealers, prostitutes, like the villains of society, right? And it's hard when you want to be a hero. 80% of Black youth play video games, and they rarely get to see themselves as a hero. I think it wasn't really until Assassin's Creed Origins, and then Spider-Man Miles Morales, before we really got some positive ones. Ubisoft did give it a try with Assassin's Creed Liberation, which I love because at the time there were only like 14 Black female playable characters, all right, and only 2 were fully clothed and positive, and one of them was the character in Assassin's Creed Liberation. The problem was that at no less than 5 times in the game, you were forced to dress as a slave. Now, I don't know about you, but my heroic fantasy is not to dress as a slave, okay? Like, I don't even know why it was in the game. They only had to ask one black person, and we would have been like, no. They didn't ask us, you know, and so what I'm trying to do here is to change that narrative, right? If, you know, we're constantly putting out these negative images. So in the 1940s, they did a test that was called the doll test. It was infamous. They used it in Supreme Court cases such as Brown versus Board of Education. And in that test, they gave little black 10-year-old girls a white doll and a black doll. And they asked questions like, who's the pretty doll, who's the good doll, who's the smart doll? They would point to the white doll. They'd say, who's the bad, the stupid, the ugly? They point to the black doll. They repeated that in 2015 with 10-year-old kids of all different races to the exact same results. And what that showed, and they even asked some of the kids on camera, which one do you look like? And the black kids who were saying all these negative things and pointing to the black doll started crying because they realized what they were saying.
Yeah.
And so we have to be much more intentional about the images that we're putting out there because it affects kids across all societies, and it just continues stereotypes and just, you know, this lack of information. But the other part of that is that when it comes to the stats of people in the video game industry, it's about just as abysmal. Less than 3% are black, Hispanic, or Native. They don't even keep stats on how many black, Hispanic, or Native people are making decisions or in the C-suites. And for women, it's not too much better. I mean, they're getting better now, but it used to be just huge juggling, whatever, and then you can put a code for juggle physics, so it makes the woman's parts juggle more, right? Like, it was ridiculous. And as a Marine Corps vet, I never went into combat half naked, so why? You also need armor, okay? And so it'd be crazy when you have dragon armor for a guy, and it is totally just bumped up. Dragon armor for the girl is a loincloth, and I don't know, but it's dumb, right? Like this. So there's some people who like that, but there's some people who want to be better represented in the game. And so I think we should have options and variety, but we also need to get more people at the table, right, to really bring that authentically. And so in developing this workforce and what I'm trying to do, I mean, not only am I now super diversifying the video game industry, but also when we think about just here in Minnesota, we sometimes forget about the disparities that we have because it's such a great place to live. But if you're a black person in Minnesota, a black family of four, I think the median income, it's under $40,000 a year. I think it's somewhere around $33,000, and you know, depending on which study that you're looking at, but it's pretty low. But an entry-level video game developer, that's about 80 or 90K a year, right? And so just by teaching these kids these skills, they're already making in the first year of being employed twice as much as their family struggled to make, you know, the past 2 years. So it's like, duh. Video games do so much, not only helping cognitive abilities of elders, teaching kids science and complex topics, but now we're taking folks who are like, you know, from maybe poor families, and boom, now they're competitive in our global tech workforce.
Well, another thing that they're doing is teaching social values and social interaction. There are a lot of games, you know, sim relationship games where the intent of the character interactions is, you know, either to get a date or to, you know, make friends. And when you have children that have issues with connections, some of these games really help. And to a creepy detriment, because sometimes they get fixated on the game and not in real life. But the aspect here is that we can create tools that help our children become better citizens. And not, you know, and I love what Assassin's Creed did, and what, you know, the game is freaking awesome. But at the same time, there's a lot more that needs to be done in the non-violent game arena, where people are allowed to interact and grow without really thinking so much about, I have to kill a monster, or I have to, you know, take someone else out. Because most of our lively, I would hope our lively interactions are based around those simple, non-threatening interactions.
And that's where the different versions of the games come. I'm just triggered in my mind that you have Minecraft, and then you have Minecraft EDU.
Yeah.
And those are similar play and all, but you don't have things trying to kill you in Minecraft EDU. And it's very much geared. It's a bit like playing on creative, but you do have to actually go out and mine and do things like that. It's like the safe mode, the peaceful mode on the regular Minecraft. And so that's the idea of the different versions for what do you want to accomplish. So playing Minecraft on regular, peaceful, or do you play it on creative? Do you want to see what the kids can create as opposed to having them grind away just to find, enough iron to build a sword? Or do you want to just give them all that and see how they can create with it and build and just go with it? So these various versions, you have to think from an education standpoint, you have to think, what is my ultimate goal for using this game? What do I want them to get out of this? So.
I have a lot of follow-up questions about things we've said. I'm curious to hear from Zaydden, if you would like to share. What are conversations that playing games with your friends have helped you have with your friends? Because we're like all excited about like, oh yeah, this helps us see representation and this helps us learn new skills and this helps us figure out what kind of person we want to be. But on the ground, when you're playing with your friends, do they spark conversations?
I was going to ask you to elaborate on the question a bit,
Sure. So there used to be a game called Grand Theft Auto. Maybe there still is. I don't know. And I think when I was in college a long time ago, you could choose as a player character to do some pretty bad things. And I feel like I remember having conversations with my friends about why would they let you do this? This is a bad idea to do this. Or, oh yeah, I finally get to try this thing I've always wanted to do. And we had conversations about the ethics of playing and doing different things in Grand Theft Auto. So that'd be like an example of a conversation that the game sparked in us. Or while you're thinking if others have similar examples.
Jump in and help jog, Jane's thoughts here. Or
I was just going to say the ethics of violence in video games can get a bit weird because there have been studies on it and it shows that, or at least from my current research, it shows that video games don't impact violence on teens unless it's at a very early age. At least, if I'm only remembering the information correctly, of course. Though, sorry, my thoughts keep blocking each other out.
I put you on the spot.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure you can't stop.
If I had more time to think about the ethics of violence, it'd be...
You're on the track, right? I mean, back in the day, they used to say, hey, if we give the printing press and let people make books, that can create dissension and cause violence. And, every medium, I guess has some opportunity to do some things and to motivate. But for the most part, people generally can make up their own minds and tell fact from fiction. For the most part, there's some people that struggle. But...
having grown up, I served during Desert Storm, Desert Shield. And having grown up with video games and with, I've seen the rise of the mass shootings. And it's one of those things where it's like, I don't blame video games for it, but I do blame a lessening of societal values in allowing it to happen, making it seem that it's okay. In video games, I honestly would love to see a bit more restraint on when a character uses force. Being able to allow for paths where it is not always needed to fight, but hey, you finally get to the boss. You need to be able to beat the boss, and to do that, you need to go fight monsters. There needs to be logic, at least in game design, for why the violence is there. In Grand Theft Auto, I always thought that was a cheap out, that the developers just wanted, tourist violence, where it could have been developed into the game as a necessity. And, it's the way that I code, it's the way that I develop websites. it's with purpose. And when people go lazy and don't put purpose into their development, that's when you get games that have a tendency of being heavily on the violent side without any consequences.
I want to jump in because I feel like I got to defend my folks here. Grand Theft Auto, right, is one, or maybe in series, maybe 10 games, but there's hundreds of thousands.
Yep.
So I want to put forth a game that has violence, but also a lot of nuanced development and teaching, and that is God of War 2018. Yes. I was a big God of War fan, God of War 2005, since then. So God of War 2018, for those of you who don't know, there's lots of violence. You play as Kratos. He was the God of War in Greece after he killed Ares. There's just, for me, the game, when I was in the Marine Corps, is when I started playing it, and all the frustration I had. Women were only 5% of the Marine Corps. You can only imagine what I had to deal with. And I would take it out by playing God of War and ripping heads off of Medusas and just having fun. But God of War 2018 showed a maturity in that particular game series, right? You still had Kratos. He is still doing violent things. Now he has a son, right? His son is really little. The mother just died, right? And he's trying to also figure out how to connect with his son, who is also grieving while he is also grieving, and where he was kind of an absentee dad, right? So he's trying to work through all of that to build this bond. And after I finished playing God of War 2018, I took my nephew on a road. It's like, nephew, I miss you. I keep hearing, boy, boy, boy. I need my nephew, and we went on a nice road trip, but it inspired me to want to spend more time, with a person who I really love and I really care about, and who I felt like I need more connection with my nephew. And hey, here we go. I'm kind of seeing how to do that. It's just going out and trying and spending time, and every day maybe making a better decision to do something. But it kind of put forth that path and kind of a little bit of a push, right, to get people to kind of step up and get it. But there's other games like that, like you have Heavy Rain. So when you talked about that, some of the violence shouldn't just be allowed. Different types of games. So Heavy Rain is a heavy character-driven game. You play as a few different characters, but you're trying to figure out who the serial killer is. One of the characters that you play at is an FBI agent. He has some cool tech skills, some cool glove that helps him survey the scene like Batman. Okay, but there's a scene where I think you kind of get surprised. A person kind of jumps out of a room. He's kind of shaky. He seems like he's maybe on meth or something. And that is the first time in the entire game that you pull a gun. And they do a good job of the weight of holding that gun up. They have the FBI, the tension is real, right? And you have to make a decision based on what this person is saying to you and how this person is maneuvering and moving and acting. Do you shoot them? Are they about to shoot you? Or do you show restraint, right? And the weight of that is heavy, right? Because in that game, when a character dies, they're dead. And that includes the player character, right? And so in that game, if you allow the FBI agent to be shot, then that character's gone, that perspective is gone, and that ability to get evidence from his point of view is gone, right? And so I think, right, developers, when we're making these games, there are different reasons, right? But when it comes to God of War, that's also, not God of War, sorry, Grand Theft Auto, they are also looking at society. And they're pulling out some of the absurdity and ridiculousness of society and kind of displaying it there, exaggerating it, sort of kind of how Saturday Night Live might be, just exaggerating it to just show the hypocrisy of it. And so, but I can see how if you're not fully invested playing it, getting that story and pulling that out, you might only see violence, right? I don't know. When I tried to play God of War, Grand Theft Auto Online, I'm getting all my games mixed up in my head. Grand Theft Auto Online, I'm the kind of player where I'm bad at multiplayer. I like to drive around, okay? I like to go racing in my little car, collect my little money from my little properties, okay? And then all of a sudden somebody drops a bomb on my head, right? I'm I'm out here non-violent, all right? I am Martin Luther King. What are you doing? But luckily, there's people who like multiplayer games. So there's people like me that like more collaborative multiplayer games, where I get to play co-op, right? I enjoy stuff like that. So I appreciate the developers that give us all a piece of that. I think we can look a little bit different and kind of dig a little deeper. It's more than just violence.
And I'm not poo-pooing violent games. I love me a shoot 'em up. I love a dungeon crawl where all I'm doing is bashing monsters, especially after a bad day dealing with really crummy customers. But at the same time, It's kind of what I got into trying to create games, was to try and create games that I feel, can actually help. I want the person that comes away from playing at my table, playing my video game, to actually want to play the next one. And it's just a little different.
The game I'm working on right now is featuring the Pointer Sisters. Okay, so it's all music. Action, role-playing, action-adventure RPG, but we're working through heavy issues, right? The game takes place in the afterlife, and the Pointer Sisters are working through some things that they couldn't resolve in death, or in life. They're trying to work through those things in death, right? So it's teaching people how to heal, in addition to just all the funness, right? So there's a lot of learning self-forgiveness. There's learning how to forgive others. There's learning how to reforge those bonds with your sisters. And then seeing how forging or reforging those bonds with your sisters also makes you stronger. And now things that were so much harder for you are so much easier because you're not there alone. And the remembrance that once you remember that you're not alone, all of a sudden you gain this little superpower. Right, and so just kind of walking through that with some fun music, rock and rolling and jamming, right? And there's no guns in the game, right? Which is just another part of it, because you're in heaven, you don't need a gun. But anyway, so so I think there's many different approaches, right? And I'm just one person, right? There's many people that have great ideas for games that if they could just get a little bit of funding, a little bit of exposure for their idea, a little bit of help and support, could really put out something really amazing and creative. That teaches, that hits on some good themes, and that's really fun to play.
Cool. I'm going to go to the audience because we're about halfway through and I see there are questions. I see an orange X in the back.
So I teach a 4th and 5th grade class at a supplementary school. So I see the kids one day a week. And I'm wondering if there are any free or low-cost tools that I could use for kids who don't have their own devices in class.
Okay.
What does the school provide? Like, what kind of resources does the school kind of have on location?
I can borrow a projector if I bring my own laptop, and anything else I bring in.
Probably go with, traditional hand, tabletop sort of things. Dungeons and Dragons, things like that. Yeah. It doesn't have to be some sort of fancy video game.
Everything I do is unplugged.
Yeah. I was going to say for 4th graders that age, I probably would not go with video games. I'd probably
Cribbage.
Cribbage. Parcheesi.
I've also
backgammon.
Yeah. I've had luck in the last couple of months. I'm working on things like vocabulary and facts by putting them into a Wordle style thing. Wordle can help with spelling. And you can play that on a whiteboard. I also will use the connections, I think it's called, where you have 4 columns and you have to put the different things together. Kids like doing that, like visually and thinking through it together.
Another thing that you can do with your kids is create your own game. Build your own rules. Start from the very beginning. Incorporate what they need to learn into those steps. So if you're doing math, or if you're doing science, you're doing English, literature, history, whatever, you can incorporate that into the game. And then have each kid present what they want to do. I find that when you do something like that, they buy in a lot quicker. It's something, when they get a good idea, when the rest of the other kids, chime in, well, that was good, they get a lot of pride. It builds confidence, it builds, support, network, that kind of thing.
I'm going to recommend a book. It came out in 2011, don't at me, it's a few years old, but it's a very good book. It's by Jane McGonigal, called Reality is Broken.
Yeah.
And if you want some good Jane McGonigal, as in Professor McGonigal, Reality is Broken. Very good book, very good background on I used it with my students to get them to think about what a game means and give them ideas about the whole idea of gamification of things. So I think if you read that, that might trigger some things like, oh, I can do these sort of things. Doesn't require any technology. So there are games, and then there's gamification. And you're shooting for that gamification.
Yellow Star, you've been patient.
So I'm wondering a little bit about kind of the behind the scenes. So in education, there's a lot of discussion about the values and ideas we're teaching. We're very intentional about what the requirements are at certain ages. A lot of people in the pie to have that conversation make with the students. And I'm hearing some things about, teaching values and ideas and concepts. I was wondering if you could talk about what the discussion looks like on that creator end in the game space when you're talking about what are you going to impart or teach. Are you engaging with community members? Is this, just amongst designers, that sort of thing?
Full disclosure, I'm a youth pastor, and so I do like a Dungeons and Dragons Magic the Gathering summer camp, and we use those games to teach values that tend to be big, broad Christian love, acceptance, welcoming values. So I have a pretty set list that I can work from.
On my end, I have I hate to mention his name, but I have to mention because he inspired this thing. That is Bill Cosby. I hate that, like you can't even talk about Bill Cosby. But Bill Cosby had something where he always had like a psychologist who reviewed the script before it was actually aired, before they did anything with it. And so that's something that I actually incorporated into my company. So on my board, there's a trauma counselor who's on my board, and as I'm working through the Pointer Sisters game, because it deals with so much trauma, right? It teaches how to work through trauma, right? So there was, in their family, there was drug addiction. There was a really bad sexual assault on June Pointer where she could never have kids, and that really impacted her entire life, because that was when she was 15, and just other things like that. And so I want to make sure that as I'm showing this pathway to healing, right, that I have psychologists looking at this and making sure that we're doing this properly. And that's also close to Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, right? That game was all about trauma, right? The whole game was about psychosis. And so they actually had a lot of just mental health professionals on staff, in addition to people who dealt and suffered with the same types of issues that the main character dealt with. So they could make sure the experience they gave you was as accurate as they could make it to what she was dealing with, as well as some protections for the player as they're playing through it, making sure that all that trauma isn't necessarily imparted to them, and that they're actually getting some tools and resources for is how to kind of help them move forward through that. So I do think there's some responsibility there with that.
If you're interested in really going down the rabbit hole, you can start doing. There are lots of people out there that research this sort of stuff. So if you start doing academic searches, like Google Scholar and such, instead of a regular Google search and such, you're going to see decades worth of research in this whole area. So,
yeah, and for gaming around the gaming table, there are sets of tools. When you're setting up a campaign, to make sure that you set up a safe environment for everybody that's playing. Dealing with trauma is one of those situations where you don't want to haphazardly go into. Bringing people on board that have lived through it, putting people on board that are specialists in that field. But the bigger thing is defining what it is that you're trying to do. Having purpose, having foreknowledge of what you're trying to accomplish, because that will inform who you need to talk to.
And if I take a step back a little bit, when I talk a little bit about the video game curriculum that I have for 10, 11, and 12 graders, part of that was also looking at the Unreal Engine and all the things that can teach in addition to making video games. So for instance, in order to make a super awesome video game, you need to have super awesome vehicles sometimes, or buildings, and so that requires learning some architecture, right? And awesomely, the Unreal Engine can also be used by architects to build buildings and structures within it, which is super cool. So just by teaching my students, right, the Unreal Engine, and in making sure that we're including architecture and building buildings, I've just exposed all these kids to that field. And I think right now, Black women architects in the United States were 0.001% 0.003% of all the architects. So even if one of these kids decides they we have just diversified the architecture space.
Or,
So-
they could be their side hustle.
so sometimes, like, in part of the development of games, we can kind of think about, what do we also want to expose these kids to? So while they're learning math or they're learning science, what else could they kind of be sidelining, to see if they're interested in that area?
I'm gonna go to hashtag # tic-tac-toe yellow in the front.
Just a comment on the first question about like low-pass games for schools. If you have Canva, there's a ton of stuff in there that you can look at. It's free. I make a lot of games for my students, like really, really high stakes games, like bears versus unicorns. Just with just different clip art from Canva, and they get to play a game. They can cheer for whichever team they want and change teams as many times as they need to. So it doesn't distract from the learning, but they still get a game. And then I also talk to a lot of parents about cooperative games. What is the purpose of what we're doing here? Are we dealing with winning and losing, and we need to learn that skill, or are we having fun family game night?
I'm gonna repeat that, the pop out for Canva as a game creation tool in the education space. And also all the things we can learn from cooperative games, which some people have never been exposed to. And so a whole new world. Green X.
Yeah, so I've always been interested in sort of the flexibility that gaming provides, whether it's on the tabletop or in video games. Jules, you just mentioned the Unreal Engine and architecture is a thing that you can expose young people to. There are other games like City Skylines and other like city planning things where you now have to learn traffic management and how to get services in place and things like that. So I guess what I'm wondering is, do you think there is any field that gaming cannot reach or cannot be gamified?
You can use gaming to solve,
We can
over
solve
pollution, overpopulation, like climate change.
SimCity, SimWorld, they all taught us that the world can be saved if we understand how to manage them.
Going to outer space, finding new, chemical things and learning how those reactions work together, learning the electromagnetic force. Like, they could teach you all those things. Like when you mentioned before about, the physics, I was like, yeah, because gaming physics is a thing, right? And that's part of what the player has to learn in order to really be successful in that game. Of when I do this, the reaction is that, right? It bounces this way instead of that way, or things like that.
The cool aspect of that is that kids are learning without noticing.
Yes, cool.
I'm gonna go to yellow X in the back.
My question is basically your guys' perspective on games that teach less educational concepts but more mindsets. Like, I grew up on Pikmin, and it basically taught me resource management and scheduling, which has basically defined the majority of my life since.
So it's because of that you are now.
Yeah, when I was a really little kid, I'm time blind. I did not really have a concept of, oh hey, there's time limits on these things. There's things I have to follow. Oh hey, I grew up in a healthy environment. We don't have to worry about, oh, there's no snacks in the cupboard. Resource management and scheduling were just not a thing to little me, and then I played Pikmin. And over the course of improving over the game, I developed those skills, and ever since then, that's how I made sure I was on time at certain places, because I was like, okay, sure, I won't be able to tell what time it is unless I look at a clock, but here's something that's this long, so by the time it finishes, it'll be this time, and I'll have to leave to go there.
So resource management and time management and living on a schedule. I'd add balance. in like any kind of like Magic the Gathering, learning the skills of balance. I'm gonna go to orange, hashtag tic-tac-toe.
I was wondering, this might be more of a pen and paper problem than anything else. How do you encourage them to engage with the mechanic that will teach them something without punishing when they don't want to, when it's an optional mechanic? There's a RPG called Inspiriles, and one of the optional mechanics of it is learning ASL, BSL. So it's like, how would I encourage my players to engage with that, give encouragement and bonus to learn the thing, but also not punish the ones that are like, I just want to role play and not deal with this.
Yeah, there was a friend of mine started a company, and that's kind of what he does. He sort of like gamifies learning in a way. But he does it in an interesting thing where once the kids accomplish certain things or certain tasks, like either within the game or whatever the space is, it's not Bitcoin, but it's like a digital currency, and they get a little bit of it, or they get like 1 or 2 or half of one or whatever. So they're actually like building, gamers, we love collecting things, right? So they get to basically like get collecting these coins. I mean, they're not worth anything, I guess, just yet until you try to put some value into them. But it's something that they can start building something up and kind of seeing it grow as they're learning and doing things and interacting with the game. So it's almost like somewhat of an achievement or like a trophy that we get when we play PlayStation or something like that incentivizes us to do things in the game that we wouldn't normally do. But if you're a completionist like me and you want that platinum trophy, then you gotta go and do the weird thing and do it, and yeah.
Yeah, it's what kind of feedback are you getting for being that completionist? So you gotta kind of tweak, maybe you might have to, in an educational setting, tweak that feedback to that student. Like, what's gonna work with this kid?
We as trophies.
Or thinking about a shared value, like, you can do this in the game, and if you do this, you are going to be able to communicate with more people, and that's something you want to do. That's the kind of person you are. So, all right, I got to keep going because we're in the rapid fire stage. Orange circle.
This is specifically for Zaydden, but anybody can answer. What's something that you suddenly realized you learned because you played a game?
I guess morals, weirdly enough. It is, I guess school didn't really teach me morals well enough, but there were, but there were like some games that definitely taught you that some things could be like inherently bad. Like, I don't know how much it affected me, but things like, if you ever heard of the game Undertale.
Yeah.
There are several different routes you can take with it, like pacifist, which is the one I tended to do because when you like hurt or like kill like all the monsters, there are major consequences to it. If you go throughout the game and you keep like killing everything, you'll see like changes within the towns, how everyone's evacuating and things are even scared of you. It is I don't know, just Undertale was the big teacher for me of morals and just generally communication in some weird ways. That's all I can say for that question though.
Yellow circle in the back.
This is a pretty pedagogical question here. I'm an engineering teacher, and one of the things we've noticed with me and my other fellow engineering teachers is like there's a big thing we're kind of overcoming with like sort of the COVID gap in learning in lots of different ways. But one of the ways we've noticed is like things that we don't think about would affect games and their performance and other things, but like simple hand strength. Kids not even be able to like cut a piece of paper with scissors at an age when they should be, that previously were more proficient. There's like, and then there's like the way we've shaped society for these kids. Like so much is done through tablet, and then there's a keyboard, and some kids have never touched a keyboard. And like, what are things? I mean, is this something that any of your spheres you are tackling or trying to do with, or on your radar, and what have you done to try to like figure out and navigate those spaces to sort of help find ways for kids to improve those skills through gaming?
Yeah, at Winona State in the education building, we have a children's center on the first floor. And talking to those teachers who work with the youngest ones, you know, you're seeing students, you're seeing kids who did not know how to hold a crayon. And kids who don't know how to turn a page in a book because they never held a book. The keyboard thing is definitely one because they've always used touchscreens. And these are things we don't consider. They do things at a child care level to work with that. But as a society, I think we don't realize what a profound effect it's had, and that's just going to move through. We're seeing it move through the grades. It's a reality now. How that affects gaming and such, I don't know, but you're absolutely right. It's a definite wave that's moving through.
But you're seeing it in the quality of art development that's being produced.
Yeah.
People are used to, or I should say, not used to, but there's been this trend, especially with the AI, that creating art now has become very simplified. Where it's like I can put into an AI engine a series of words and get produced a piece of art that I think is mine. And being upfront about it and telling people, you know, and showing people, this is how you do art. You know, the question about, you know, how do you create a game, or how do you get kids engaged, and I said, you know, create a game about it, having them be able to create their own parts, you know, make them, you know, teach them how to create the pieces, create tokens, you know, when they're doing the artwork for it, you know, work collaboratively on the artwork. All of these things, you know, stronger students will help weaker students develop. You know, and it doesn't have to be so embarrassing, you know, because the student needs a teacher to help them. And it also gives them the opportunity to develop how to reach out to other people and how to get help without feeling like they're the ones that are weak.
I want to address, if I can, quickly, maybe the elephant in the room here, right? AI is, I have maybe a more, not necessarily doom and gloom view of AI, but maybe what it's going to do to society, right? And I say this from a person who helps develop it, right? But there's so much good that it can do, that we are basically just allowing ourselves to play with fire, because we are moving closer and closer to a society where core skills are lost. Core skill, even just like writing. So for instance, I teach, law classes, and all of that involves your ability to reason, legal reasoning, right? And I can't accurately assess that if a person is giving me an AI-generated thing, which is dumb because I developed AI. I know exactly how it will respond to my questions. But we have to really think about that, right? When we talk about, this is just even further, this universal, basic income and all these things, we need to give that more thought. We have to be intentional about trying to keep some of the skills that we have. We are mortal people. We have flesh and blood. We have a limitation, even though there's a lot that we can learn. We have a lifetime. We have a limitation to how much we can learn in a single moment, right? AI's limitation for how much it can learn in a single moment is 1,000,000 times exponentially what we can learn in a single moment, right? We can maybe take in a few bits of data at a time, where AI can take in hundreds of thousands of bits of data, and it can communicate that digitally to the other computer over there and over there and over there. When we're communicating this information to each other, I can only communicate to you as fast as I can talk and you can listen to me, right? It's not as fast as a download. And so we have to be real. We're also teaching AI based upon our brains, is how we've developed its algorithm and how we've developed its learning by association. And that's allowed it to be extremely in a way kind of creative. Like when you're talking to it sometimes, I know that AI is not yet sentient, right? We can say that. We don't see what they actually have in the Google headquarters, but what they present publicly, okay? But it will still say as you're talking to it, especially the reasoning models, when you tell it was wrong, it was like, I see. I should have said this because I should have associated that with this. And you just taught it. It now knows that. And now when it's asked that by somebody else, it's gonna pull that and it's gonna remember that association that you also just taught it. When we go into like art, because it's basically learning of all these associations that even now we humans may not have associated one thing with the other thing, or at least maybe we humans over here, but maybe that one human over there that told the thing, right now it knows it. And so it is going to be infinitely more creative. But right now, it's only creating the things that we're asking it to create. And so it's only going to be as good as the words, the prompts that we give it. And basically right now, it does exactly sort of what we say. But we can put a slider. It feels like a little kid. Or it's like you're talking to a genie. It's almost like you have to get a lawyer to make sure your wording is correct to get there. Then you have to iterate. You have to ask it the same thing with different seeds, like 100, 200 times to get the one that's good. But that's only going to last, for so long. 3 years from now, it's probably going to be its capabilities enough to create a legal brief and to create just amazing things. And I think that we can't take that for granted or think that that's going to stop because the American government not putting anything in place to make it stop is ensuring that it won't. So I think I don't want to just dump on everything, but we have to take AI seriously. We have to talk with our elected officials to make sure they're putting things in place to protect our data and to make sure, for our creativity and things like that, we have to think that through. And we can't just say, not right now, let's do it later, because it is moving so fast that, we have to put these safeguards in. But we also have to look at it and understand that it can teach extremely well. Right now, it's really bad at making something more complex, but it is extremely good at breaking it down and simplifying it. So if you want to teach a kindergartner Einstein's theory of relativity, AI can do that. It can produce exactly what you should say in 30 seconds, and the kindergartner that you teach it to will be like, I totally get that, right? Because it's able to distill it and simplify it in a way that, I don't know. I'll stop because we're running low on time, but I would love to talk with you more after this.
We are in fact over our time.
Oh my God.
So I was going to give us each a chance to give a shout out for our one recommendation we didn't get a chance to make, but come talk to us after. And if you want, I did make a list of kind of our pedagogy here and the games that we mentioned here, so you can come and take a picture of it if that's helpful for you. Thanks for coming. The evaluation QR code is on the back of the room. Have a great night.
Thank you.